Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about Platinum End. I've read the manga all the way throughout. The final chapter landed today, or not today, but it landed on Viz. I think it was today actually. But whatever, it's here. I'm excited. January 6th. I'm excited. I want to talk about it. This is the kind of manga that I kind of live for because it's cool. It's cool when we have this kind of material because this is one of those materials where the characters aren't necessarily correct in what they're supposing, and it's just so interesting to see it unfold here. When we're looking at the final chapter of Platinum End, what we're looking at is a very cynical ending. We're looking at essentially a failed attempt. If you guys go on Viz, you can also see my comment that I put there. We're gonna go through the chapter, and I'm gonna talk about the big points for me. Because when it comes to these kind of things, the thing that we got to be looking at, and the thing I think that might confuse people, is the fact that characters are wrong. Platinum End got really interesting for me when we talked about the interpretations of God, what people believed God to be, and it's actually really interesting to see how things shake out. At the end of the day, many people were incorrect here within the universe when it came to the whole situation with God, and it's important to point out where exactly the problems ended up being. Really, I want to talk more about the end because the end is what gives a lot of context to the situation. And I think here you have to be really careful. So we're going to start at the end of the chapter after humans have been destroyed, that only their structures are left. One of the final panels that we get is give up on that planet. And the other higher beings are saying nothing will spring to life there that is capable of killing us. So what's going on here at that final bit? When you see the final pages, what you need to understand is that this planet Earth was created as not a simulation from the perspective of a higher being, but it was created for a purpose. The purpose of the planet was to potentially create a situation where something in that planet could kill the higher beings. As you see in the final pages, the higher beings want to die. One thing that's important to note in the higher beings is that they point out that they are jealous, and they also point out that the fact that something dies is what makes it beautiful. And this rhetoric, the fact of people dying, that making people worthwhile, that rhetoric, we've seen it before. Heck, even the past anime season, Noblesse has a similar rhetoric about the fact that people die. That's what makes people special, because their lives burn more brightly. This is rhetoric that authors have played with before. This isn't unique to Platinum End, but it is neat for this higher being. It is neat when the higher beings are talking about, like, hey, we want to die too. We want to have these wonderful lives. We want a life with purpose. We want a life that it feels like, oh shit, you know, I need to do things. A life that motivates us to do things. You can kind of understand it. So that's the big thing here. You have to appreciate that the reason that they are jealous is because they see something unique that comes out of the fact that you know you die. And then when you look at their rhetoric, like the best thing you can do with their rhetoric is compare it to the rhetoric of the main character, because in this chapter he has a line about, you know, everyone dies and all that kind of stuff. He's probably the one that you gotta look at and contrast to this one. But that's not what I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is the question that they suppose when they were saying, we were not born from that planet to begin with. The planet of our birth no longer exists. Perhaps it would be quicker to identify what created us. That was so interesting, right? Because there's layers of gods going on here. When you have them talking about, like, hey, let's plant another god on that planet. When you have them talking about that, it's like, oh shit, you know, that's interesting. They are the god above God. But when they go down that loop, they pointed out the line of thinking suggests that something created... that line of thinking suggests that something created that which created us. So what that is saying, that suggests that there is something that created the planet that created us. And I gotta point that part out because when you look at the god power structure, how the god is tied to the humans, it makes sense that they premise it with two layers of creation. Because most likely the planet, they were linked to it in some kind of weird way. Anyway, they're saying in an endless sequence that only takes us further from death. The reason they say endless sequence is because once you start playing with the idea like, well, we're the higher beings that can't die, and we're saying that there is something that created us, but if we go and pursue this in this situation, are we not only going to find layers upon layers upon layers of gods, given that we are a god in a layer compared to the humans? So that is actually a very interesting infinite loop. I do like that they considered that. It is interesting how they just back away from it and just like, yo, we just want to die, bro. Pretty cool stuff. Now, what is important to really take away from here is the gods. You got to work backward because of how the way that people were wrong. So what you ultimately see here is that this manga is really about. Let me just read what I wrote on this, because I think I had a really good summation. This story is about a failed experiment that involved suicidal participants formulated by suicidal experimenters. That's pretty much what we get, and the big takeaway was that no one knew anything for sure. When it comes to the humans were all trying to do their best based on what they understood. But what was really interesting was just how wrong people were, and how people committed to it. So there is a really strong idea about being ego driven here, because it's ultimately people's egos that are being proven wrong here, and people's egos that are being shown to be incorrect. So what we had to understand specifically is that when God suicided, God did not think that all the humans were going to go with him, right? The reason we know that is because he says it himself. If I disappear, there will be effects upon the heavens, but not the human world. Only the red arrows I left with the professor will disappear. If they vanish, he will understand that the creature is no more. Okay, so what we had to understand there is that that was a bad assumption. Why did a bad assumption exist? It's because the guy was quoting the professor. And when you look at the professor's thing, the professor is looking at the situation and he's saying like, I am not wrong. There's no way I am wrong. When he even considers that his theory is wrong, he just throws it down. So we have to understand the professor's words, I am not wrong, regardless of what anyone says, God was created by human imagination. No, you are wrong. That's entirely incorrect. We know that is not the case. The higher beings prove it the moment that they say God was a seed that was created. The moment you have God talking about existing and Nase being there before him, nah, he was created before human imagination. Now, he continues on saying, if the creature can erase all life as we know it, then the heavens, the angel, and the creature, they're all a human weapon of human genocide. That will be a much more practical way of seeing it. The only mistake in my theory was its composition. It was a science I had not yet understand. Now, I'm not sure if he came to a new conclusion, but the fact that he ends off with justifying that being a weapon of human genocide is the way to go just shows us that he was still deluded. I don't know if he had a new thought at the end, but the way that it's structured tells me he's still deluded. God was not a weapon of human genocide. When you look at what the gods were saying about God, what they were trying to do was create something that was greater than them. And that opens up like the really interesting question, is it possible to become greater than the thing that contains you? Now, I think so in this universe, because the higher beings mentioned that their own planet died. And the fact that they can still exist despite their planet might be pointing towards that philosophical answer. But what we have to take away here, again, is that the Doctor was deluded. And what that ultimately tells you for the overall story is that, again, this was a very ego-driven story. This was a story where it was ultimately a clash of what people believed to be the case. And what you get at the end is like, no, you were all wrong. Now, as to why the humans die when God goes out, it might just be an inexplicable, like, it might just be a horrific connection, right? Like, because God exists, well, actually, if you take on philosophies, you know how people say people are made in the image of God? If God is the source and all the humans are like a fragment of God, then the original source dying, it depends on how you play with it, but there are some interpretations where you could say, well, yeah, if God dies, everything that was born of God also dies. It'd be better to compare it maybe to a body and the cells. Like if the main body dies, then obviously the red blood cells within the body are also going to die. It's a little bit messy. There are some things that throw me off. For instance, human creation gets to stay, which is kind of wonky to make a distinction between humans and the things born of the planet, because at the end of the day, the planet that's you can still characterize some things there. It's a little bit wonky. Another thing that's kind of wonky is that when you look at what's left, there's more deserts now, and the trees are dead, which tell us that life died. And so in this particular context, life includes humans and plant life, most likely animals as well. I would have liked to see like the whole planet kind of disintegrate, but that might not have been as strong of a thing. But the fact that the planet can still actually, looking at it, I think you need to look at chapter 57. Okay, in chapter 57, when I came to the earth before it supported life. Okay, so there's the stipulation. Because the planet existed before God, we can make the stipulation, okay, that means that any geological formations do not count as a part of what God gave the world. Okay, fair enough. So within that structure, it looks like it works out. So actually, good. Great on them. Great on them. They justify why the planet exists still. Overall, though, the other interesting thing would be NASA's situation. Like, why does NASA necessarily get to get destroyed? Well, because NASA took cells of God. If we're going under the God is the body and everything else are the cells within the body, maybe NASA, you could say she's like a white blood cell. It justifies why she could be killed only because she got so integrated into the system. Actually, you might be able to call NASA just an external bacteria that got into the body, and since it can't parasite off the body anymore, like it dies off and all that, I think that would be a reasonable interpretation. Regardless, really awesome stuff. I think this was super cool. I think this was a really interesting ending. Kind of anticlimactic, like I feel a little bit sad, but I definitely like how incorrect people were. I like that they showed people being incorrect. I mean, at the end of the day, these were people who their philosophies were made correct only by their belief in the philosophy. And it is just interesting how, in a way, there is irony here. Because the doctor was so wrong, he provoked God into suiciding. And it's just also, there is that humor in that, you know, they created a or the higher beings who are suicidal created a product that ended up suiciding in the ultimate way. Just really interesting overall. Anyway, that was Platinum End, a series about people just fighting about what they thought they believed, all being proven wrong at the very end because someone chose the wrong option, and didn't fully understand the world that they lived in. At the very least, the readers get to understand the world that those people lived in far more than the people themselves. There was one more little bit of imagery that I wanted to point out, though. When God was talking about, we know when insects, animals, and humans die because they have bodies. You know, that was just really interesting. I just wanted to like say out loud, like, basing death on a physical body, pretty brave, honestly. A pretty brave idea. That kind of already told you that they were already off their rocker because of what you could define as physical and all that. But I thought that was interesting that you know something dies because you can observe bodies. I do wonder if the higher beings are in a situation where they know death occurs because they're observing lower bodies. But what happens if the higher beings actually do die? It's just that their lifespan is so ridiculously long, and because they're seeing everything else die around them, they're like, well, shit, we're immortal, kind of thing, right? I do wonder if that's the situation. But that's the only rhetoric that might point to it, and even then, it's only like imagery rhetoric. It's not very good rhetoric to say that that's the case for the higher beings. Regardless, cool stuff. So the big takeaways to remember is that the higher beings, they don't know what's going on. They want to die. They thought the planet had the potential to birth someone that could kill them. It didn't. Maybe, honestly, NASA would have been the person. That might have been the only person that would have been capable of it because she was outside of God, so she was outside of their expectations. But we see where that went. And then beyond that, when it came to the humans, as it turned out, everyone was wrong. Anyway, everyone, let me know what you thought down below, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day. ReZero came out today, so I'm hoping to maybe watch it later. Anyway, till next time.